Purse Strings offers an available for hire network of vetted professionals who specialize in serving women. When you have a life event that has suddenly made money a priority, you can now move forward with a whole new confidence that you're getting advice and services from savvy professionals who are uniquely equipped to serve your needs. Go to pursestrings.co and use our directory of handpicked financial professionals when you're ready to plan for retirement, navigate divorce, buy your next home, fire up your new business, and more. Go to pursestrings.co or check the link in the show notes. Now you can be financially fearless.
Thank you, fearless listeners, and go you for hitting play. Please like and subscribe as it helps us grow. Also, share this with a friend as we have to keep talking about this shit. Now let's dive in.
Coming up on today's edition of Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about, our guest is Deb Curtis, founder of Curtis Small Business Finance Solutions.
Deb has such a passion for women and minorities who want to own their own businesses.
Yes, and she comes with years of experience and creds to make it happen.
We know that 1,800 women open new businesses every day in the U.S., yet it's so hard for them to get funding.
And this is unfortunately true, but we're going to dig into why this is happening and how Deb can help women and minorities get funding.
Let's do this.
Gloria Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
Hello, Deb, and thank you for being on our podcast today. We cannot wait to dig into all of our questions around women and small business lending. But before we do, could you share a bit about yourself to our listeners?
I sure will, Maggie and Barbara. Thank you both, ladies, for having me here. I am proud to be a member of Purse Strings and to be on this wonderful show, to be a voice of reason for all the ladies out there. Women empowering women, right?
You got it. That's right.
Darn right. So a little bit about who I am. I'm just going to stick with the professional side of things. And I am a Gen Xer, proud to be a Gen Xer. I love baby boomers. As we know, we're living right now in the right here, right now of the greatest wealth transfer ever because we're all living longer, and that includes baby boomers.
Yep.
And out of the baby boomer generation, Barbara, 11,000 per day are retiring, and this trend is going to continue for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. I knew this when I worked formally in corporate America. I worked in banking, business banking, many various banks, had all men supervisors in SBA lending, and I supported small business owners when it came to their lending needs. They would call on me, the business banker, the portfolio manager, the SBA lender. I was different kind of positions throughout my final 20 years of my 30-year corporate tenure. Through that journey, one thing that stood out real clear to me, girls, was the fact that I was in an industry that was very male dominated. And if we think back decades ago, when we used to walk into a branch and it was hustle and bustling and there were actually employees and lines of customers because nothing was online, it was all in person.
Right.
Most of your business banking team were men. And as time progressed, I found myself hired into teams where I was the only female navigating through the waters of supporting small businesses. And I also noticed a trend that many of the small business owners, if not most in some cases, were men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So through time and through navigating corporate, it never was easy, but I learned a lot. I believe we learn a lot from our challenges of the past. And if you're in challenges right now, those challenges, like mine were, created solutions for me to uplift women today and help them realize those baby boomers that are retiring. Many of them own small businesses that are established and they're earning an income. They're profitable. There's a salary that can be transferred to you, the new owner transitioning in. And furthermore, if you're really good at managing people, it could be 3 people, it could be 20, it could be 500. There's different small business sizes, but they're established and they're money making. And you can transition in as the new owners, so the baby boomer can completely retire, and now you own a small business where it's not a ground up startup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my career, I supported all these businesses and I was attracted to those business acquisition financing deals. Did very well. I was a top performer, but I also noticed that the business listings, which were on the market by business brokerage firms, another very male-dominated industry where most men represent these business listings, and therefore they're selling the businesses, and you didn't find too many women that were business brokers. So long story short, I exited corporate America just because I saw much that I was not approving of as a woman internally. And I also witnessed much externally that I saw peers with their own biases of who would qualify for these small businesses, acquiring them, and maybe just who they felt they would rather work with. And I'll leave it at that. So that is where it has led me to today. And since 2018, I established my small business, and I proudly represent women to educate them and teach them how, because they just don't know how. And it is simple. You just need someone to guide you how to acquire these businesses that are either absentee owned or part-time absentee owned, and own them and thrive and build financial freedom and wealth. The list goes on. Yeah. So this is what I do today. And I'm gonna educate to the masses, and thank you, ladies, for having me on this show, because this is part of the journey of educating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so exciting because we know more and more women are opening new businesses every single day. And women are great business owners. They are very successful. A lot of the stats will show that they outperform male business owners. But I would just like to dive into some of the work that you've done and you've seen. Why do you think women should own their own business today?
Yeah, they should own their own business because they have a heart for people, and we're multitaskers. And you think about being a mama, or we have eyes on the front of our head, the back of our head. We can hear things. We're very cognizant of our surroundings, and you need to have that in small business ownership, whether you're in it or looking over it. What I want to share with your listeners, the women, you don't have to just ground up a business from ground zero. Mm-hmm. You can transition into these businesses that are already successful and operating. And women can do it too. I think of Rosie the Riveter, the icon from 1850s or so, and her slogan was, "We can do it too." And that was women during the war. The men were fighting in war and the women had to go to work. So they were working. They started to work in manufacturing companies because they said, "No, you can't." Well, yes, you can. And that's where that slogan came from. We can too.
Right. So, and, it's a great opportunity for women to have their own flexibility. I mean, running your own business is no small feat. Let's face it, right? However, if we have seen in COVID, women are the safety net for everything and can manage a lot and can spend their time working for themselves rather than spending that time working for a corporation and earning a big corporation their money.
Yeah. Wow. You help women purchase other businesses, which if I'm going to be honest, I have never thought about a day in my life before. Being an entrepreneur, like, really crossed my mind, but buying a different business to continue running it has never crossed my mind. And I'm sure that's common with a lot of our listeners out there. So just to get started, like, what are some of the type of businesses that you have helped, women purchase or help sell that might be relatable to us out here that, we can kind of look at?
Yeah. And you started out that question with, how do you do it? And what I want to first preface here for your listeners, think of the time if you're a home buyer or a homeowner today. Our first homes we purchased finance. We didn't know how to do it. Do you girls remember that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, I was young and my husband and I are like, oh my gosh, we got to buy a house. It's kind of like when you have your first baby. Oh my gosh, we're going to have a baby. How do we do this? It's the same. Purchase financing a business. It's the same. It can be done if you're working with the right consultant to help you get there. So some great examples I want to share with you as you asked, Maggie, some women that I have helped. I can think of a gal who worked in the HR industry, staffing, recruiting. She worked company after company. I can see her resume as I'm looking in my mind. She had several positions, but a lot of them were 2 years, 3 years. And I went through her resume with her, and it was all recruiting and staffing and such. And I asked her what happened on her journey through corporate. And a lot of it was she was laid off. She didn't get a promotion, so she quit. She was passed over and dismissed. So she had all this experience on her resume, but corporate job after corporate job, she wasn't climbing that ladder that she thought she would. So somewhere along the line, she heard from somebody that she could buy a staffing agency. And sure enough, she did. She contacted a broker, and there was a staffing agency in Florida, very profitable. The baby boomer business owners, a husband and wife, they pretty much had the team of employees operating the business while they spent time traveling to visit their grandchildren. So the owners weren't there on site anymore. They trained up the team. They started up that business 15 years ago, put in the blood, sweat, and tears that every startup small business owner does to stay alive those first couple of years, trained up the people. We call them key employees. And now they're selling the business. True story. This week, because Barbara, you heard me share with you this story. The same gal that purchased financed that business with me, she's going to buy a second location.
Wow.
Because the same employees are at that business from the original founder and doing a great job, and the business is thriving. It's in Florida, which is a market where everybody's moving, and they're so excited they're buying a second location. It's a franchise, which I do both mom and pop businesses and franchise businesses, and there's another location right next to the market where they're located. Now, how cool is that? So that's an example of a female taking over a business. And then I have another gal a couple of years ago. I have several, but this one in particular, she was in the in-home healthcare industry. And again, worked as a manager, worked her way up, originally was one of the in-home healthcare representatives that takes care of the clients and such. And then she built her way up where she was a manager of a team of people. Her resume reflected, again, employer after employer, same story. What happened here? Well, I maxed out my pay. I couldn't earn any more income. So then I went to this next employer. You know how they say, if you quit your current job, you'll make more money elsewhere. And then you could quit that job and go back to the same employer, maybe get another bump.
Yeah, I know, jumping around.
So it's looking at the resumes of women that was very common. So sure enough, she, through the years, has a love of people, loves the caring of customers and clients, knows how to manage a team. And we found an in-home healthcare agency that she's now owner operating today. And my hope is that she'll acquire a second location, or some of my clients, if they want a second or third business, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same industry. You may have a passion in a different industry, which, in my opinion, depending upon what industry you're in, it might be good to diversify and have different industries within, right? So, and here's a little bit of if you can recognize these industries, they're essential needs.
Right.
Right? We need to hire people. Employers want to hire.
Right.
Right. And then we all need help. We're all living longer. We elderly need help at home. That's never going to go away. AI can't take care of elderly at home. So
That's right. Good point.
Yeah. And these are positions that women are really good at, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are. And I have to say, women can also take over auto repair shops. And you're thinking, well, they don't know how to lift up the hood and change the oil. Well, some do. There are some, but there are women out there that have worked for auto repair shops, right, where the man is the business owner under the hood, and they manage the intake, the customer service, the ordering of the inventory. They're great candidates to acquire auto repair shops. Again, essential needs.
So, Deb, are you also considered a broker as well to find these businesses?
Yes. So I call myself a business acquisition lending consultant, specializing in SBA business acquisition transactions. Where I don't want your folks to get confused is that I'm a jack of all trades and take in all SBA loan requests. I used to do that when I worked in corporate America, but today I only focus on change of ownership finance transactions. And because I was in corporate America for 30 years, I have a network of SBA lenders who I call upon to source the best bank loan project for these change of ownership transactions. And I source the best project for my clients. So when we fund, they're in a situation that's going to be most successful for them. And I want to just explain a little bit further. These acquisition transactions that banks offer, every bank has a different credit policy as to what they'll approve and what they won't approve. And they change. Credit policies change a lot. Some banks will offer working capital in these loan projects to help the transitioning owner pay for rent, marketing expenses, payroll. That's all short-term operating expenses. But there are other banks out there that won't offer working capital. So if you're going to be successful in an ownership transition, when you buy that business, if it's an asset purchase, the seller's not going to leave $100,000 in his checking account for you just to pay the bills.
Right, right.
Yeah, we will talk together, my clients and I, and we'll look at the historical expenses of the business and determine how much is needed each month to pay those bills. And the underwriter will include 3 to 6 months working capital in the loan to help you be successful when you transition in to pay the bills.
So you step into a new business, or you've purchased a business that's not new, but you're new to it, and you already have the money to pay the bills every month.
That is correct.
So it's somewhat seamless.
Yes. But again, when you asked earlier, am I a loan broker? I am, but a specialist broker only on business acquisition finance deals for women. Not all banks give that working capital, and I used to work for one of them. I won't mention any names, but I know where not to go because they expect you to have the personal cash to pay those bills. We want you to have personal cash because that's being a prudent lender, and you always want emergency funds in case of an emergency. But I want to work with a bank that knows every small business needs working capital, and you can't transition into one without it.
Got it. So what kind of money are we talking about here? When these women are buying these businesses, are we talking about $500,000, $2 million? Like, what kind of funding are they getting from You've mentioned SBA, which is Small Business Association.
Well, I also want to add to this question. It's like kind of like a home. Do you need, 2.5 or 20% down, first to even get that loan? Or how does this purchase kind of work? Even just kind of comparing it to a house.
Yeah. Really, really good questions here, girls. It is like a first-time home buyer program. You do have to have good credit. You can't finance a business without good credit. You can't even finance a home without good credit. You will need down payment when you purchase these businesses, just like when you buy a home. The SBA requires a 10% down payment when you purchase these businesses. And that 10% can be split up with eligible sources of what we call equity injection, otherwise known as the down payment. For instance, the SBA will allow that 10% down payment to be split where the seller will hold back 5% of the price of the business and not get paid until either the SBA loan is paid in full or there's some new guidelines coming into place after a 2-year waiting period of standby. So, and I say that because there are different rules that are going into effect in August. They're just not there now. So I'm trying to be cognizant because I'm sure there are people listening that know the rules. So good credit, cash down, and a lot of SBA lenders out there that work with the banks might not know all of the eligibility sources toward that 10%. For instance, I funded a business acquisition for a young man years ago when I worked at a bank, and 10% down was what he needed, but he was short on the cash. His mom gifted a third of the 10%. The seller carried back a third of the 10%. He put in that final third, if not a little bit more, to make it the 10% total, and still had enough cash for personal emergencies, because underwriters want to make sure we're not drying every dollar out of the savings when you buy a business. Mm-hmm. So keep that in mind for all your listeners, that yes, you have to have down payment, but there are options to pool, even grants, small business grants in the town where the small business is located. You might be able to find, I call it free money, which means the economy, they're trying to lift it in downtown areas of small rural towns. Mm-hmm. They may give you 50 grand if you're going to be a business owner and keep that business open, because if nobody buys that business, what's going to happen?
Right.
Employment losses, it's dreadful to see small businesses close. So a lot of options out there. I want to make sure I answer both of your questions. Did I get there, girls?
Yeah, I think that was great.
Okay.
So there's cash flow, and then they just make a monthly payment like you would a mortgage payment every month back to your small business loan. And so what are the amounts of loans that are typical for a small business? What have you seen the range to be?
Yes. And as you mentioned, there's cash flow to the business. And that is what we call the profits of the business. That is what pays your bank loan project that's backed by the SBA. Okay. Where a lot of individuals get confused thinking I'm going to finance a business. They think of what their total income is right now today before even buying the business. It's kind of like when you buy a house, I've got a rent payment, and if I buy this house, the rent payment goes away and now I have a mortgage payment. Well, all of your listeners are thinking, if I buy a business, how can I afford that when I have a mortgage payment, a car payment, I got to feed the kids? Well, the business you're buying is generating a profit, a net income, and the bank underwriters look at the last 3 years filed tax returns of that business to make sure it's reporting sufficient income to pay for your loan project to buy the business plus that working capital. Okay. So remember that, ladies, it's the business income that's making the SBA loan payment. Now, if we're looking at a business that somebody wants to buy and the seller just chose not to report profits because he didn't want to pay taxes, that business is probably not going to get a loan for you to buy it. And there's plenty of them out there because, let's be honest, baby boomers wanted to take a cut from the IRS and not pay Uncle Sam if they didn't have to. And it was allowed. It was allowed to do that. It's still allowed today. So the second question, Barbara, after that, what was that?
Like, what's the range in terms of small business lending?
The range that the banks I work with typically are loan projects of $500,000, and believe it or not, you can go up to $5 million, sometimes even higher, but the max for the SBA is $5 million. Some banks will do over $5 million by a conventional loan with the SBA loan. My recommendation, this is just my own personal opinion, for first-time business owners, I think a very good, comfortable range should be $500,000, no more than $2 million. I get nervous when a first-time business owner is looking at a $5 million business and they've never owned a business before.
Yeah, that sounds a little risky.
It's like back to being a home. You buy that first home, you learn how to manage it, you learn how to upkeep, and then, you step into something bigger. Whether you keep the other one and rent it or you sell it, that's up to you later. But, you just do one step at a time. You don't usually start with the mansion.
Maggie, that's so sage, because many SBA lenders out there, they don't think in the shoes of the buyer. They're just thinking about the bigger the loan, the more they're going to make. So that's why women have to be careful who they're working with. You want to make sure whoever your lender is or your consultant, that they're really thinking of what your best interest is. You need to test the waters, right? And why jump in the pool when it's 100 feet deep? You should just jump in where it's 10 feet deep and you can swim and test the waters.
Yeah. So what's the term on the loan? Like for a mortgage, it's either 15 years or 30 years conventional. What's the term on an SBA loan?
On the SBA business acquisition, it's a 10-year fully amortized loan. And most banks, not all, most banks offer a variable rate, which is tied to prime plus a spread. But there are banks that I know of as well that will offer a fixed rate. Then the question is fixed better today when prime is 8.5 and we might have another bump coming up? I don't know that answer. We'll always discuss it with the bankers that we work with. But yes, that 500,000, I'd say up to 2 million is a good place to start. Average interest rate today can be anywhere from maybe a 7% fixed to a variable of 10 or 11%. It just depends what bank is willing to take on the project and who's going to give the best structure, right?
So can they be like if you have a high rate and you want to go back and what's it called again? I forget that term.
Like a refinance?
Yeah, refinanced.
Yeah. SBA won't allow a refinance.
Okay.
That's
interesting.
Against the rules.
So the rate you get is the rate that you maintain for the 10 years of the loan.
Correct. However, the statistics with the SBA tell us that the average SBA 7A loan, which is typically startups, business acquisitions, debt consolidations, the average time that loan stays on the book, so to speak, or open is about 3 to 5 years before it's paid in full. And paid in full means most likely the small business owner said, I'm going to see if my local community bank will refinance this SBA loan of mine into a conventional loan. And that is what happens generally, especially if they're in a variable interest rate. When it was low in 2020 and rates started going up, if you had a low rate and you thought rates were going up, you were probably contacting your local community bank to see if you could pay off the SBA loan by refinancing it into a conventional loan.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Business acquisitions, the first 2 years when the new owner takes over, banks won't finance that conventionally generally because of the risk. You have a brand new owner going in, right, to a business that's used to the current owner. And character of the new owner is really critical into the decision-making process of the bank underwriter. Character is very important. A love of people and a forward thinker, someone who has patience and grace. And you know who comes to mind every time I talk about this? Women. Right? I really believe our future, if we can educate enough, we're going to level the ownership playing field of small businesses. And if not, we're going to take the lead. Maybe one day the men will be the minority in small business ownership.
Well, the way that the future looks with 1,800 women opening new businesses every day today, and also with business owners being men who are retiring, there's going to be a huge shift. I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's telling women, look, wow, there's all this opportunity out there that no one's ever talked to you about before, probably.
That's right on. If I would have known what I know today, 5, 10, 15 years ago, I would have probably financed an established business that was making money. And then I probably would have bought a second one. And I have clients that do this, once they're absentee and they're running good. If the people love you, think of yourself as a supervisor. I remember the days when I was a supervisor. If you put into your people, they put into your business. That's what it is. I think of women, most women have a knack for that. They just have a knack. So yeah, the education is something that we lack for women to hear or learn about this. And I believe part of that is because the industry in business banking and SBA lending and in business brokerage is very dominated by men. So the men are acquiring these businesses faster than you can imagine because they're profitable and they know how to do it. So I'm going to just expedite my voice on these shows, podcast shows, to get the education out there because we equally can operate these businesses and oversee them.
Yeah, this conversation has really got me thinking, like, as being an entrepreneur and starting all this stuff up and doing it from the ground up, I'm like, wow, if I could just buy something that's already started, why reinvent the wheel? I mean, it seems like a great opportunity. One more question I have for you around that is like, what is the length of a process of if you're interested in buying a business, is that like 6 months, 2 years? What does that look like?
Yeah. And it really depends upon, once we get you qualified as a business buyer, I do all of the vetting. I know the questions to ask and the eligibility of SBA that all the banks follow. It's kind of like a pre-qualification letter that you received when you go home shopping. You don't go to open houses and say, I love this house. Now I'm going to go to my bank and finance it. That's backwards. You need to go to the specialist that looks at your personal finances, your savings, your credit, ask questions, looks at your resume, the industries, what is your desire to, what industry do you want to be in or industries? And then we determine a certain dollar amount in that 500,000, in my opinion, to 2 million range, even though you can go higher, but I'll always say, let's just back up the bus a bit and try it first, right? So do that first. And the process, then we go to work looking and searching the market for that profitable business where the tax returns were indeed filed and show there's sufficient net income to make your SBA loan project payment. I help with that. You can steer the bus to work with business brokers that represent the listings, or you could steer the bus and maybe some business owners in your local neighborhoods that you really like. Maybe there is an assistant living center or an in-home healthcare agency that you love in your neighborhood or in your county or nearby. Maybe you know the owner. You don't know what you don't know until you ask. And sometimes some of the best acquisitions are people that just in general will contact the owner out of the blue to ask them if they're interested in selling their business. And if they know you and you're a customer, oh man, they would love to pass that business on to you.
That's an awesome way to go about it. One last question, Deb, before we wrap this up. How do you get paid? Who pays you for the work that you do?
That's right. And because I do have to get paid, and I've been doing this a long time, and I do want to earn an income to do what I do. So here's what happens. I will consult with business buyers, talk about like we just did today, and then they send me a short list of items, and this is all at no charge at this point. There's a personal financial statement that tells me about their personal assets, their personal liabilities. We talk about credit. I look at their resume, and then I determine if indeed they would qualify as a business buyer to purchase finance a certain dollar amount of a business. And if that is correct, then they engage me. And my engagement fee is $2,500 that they pay me to start the process to give them an SBA pre-qualification letter that they are an eligible business buyer for this specific dollar amount. Then we go to work looking at business listings that they find on their search, or maybe I find as well with my network. That process can take 30 days. That process can take 6 months. I can recall my longest process with a client a couple years ago was 1.5 years until he found the right business. Mm-hmm. Because you as the buyer want to be satisfied that this really is the business I want. And when we do due diligence, sometimes things pop up that we don't like, and now that business gets off the table and we move on to the next. So from start to finish, it all varies. My fastest transactions where everything was in order, 60 days, and the longest, the longest was 18 months. So it just really depends. Sellers too, it can depend upon how quick they are to get information to us, because there are required financial documents that the SBA wants the bank to have. And if they don't have it, we can't move forward because there's no banking decision then.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, this has been fascinating. You've really opened our eyes to kind of the process and procedure and the types of businesses women can look to purchase should they want to run their own business, one that's up and running and also has a positive cash flow. It's kind of a no-brainer. So thank you, Deb, for bringing this information to the forefront. And we look forward to having more discussions, and thrilled that you're in our community at Purse Strings.
Oh, yes. Thank you, girls, Barbara, Maggie, and everyone at Purse Strings. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. I hope everyone else has a wonderful day. Like and subscribe, as that always helps our podcast, and be financially fearless.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.
Purse Strings offers an available for hire network of vetted professionals who specialize in serving women. When you have a life event that has suddenly made money a priority, you can now move forward with a whole new confidence that you're getting advice and services from savvy professionals who are uniquely equipped to serve your needs. Go to pursestrings.co and use our directory of handpicked financial professionals when you're ready to plan for retirement, navigate divorce, buy your next home, fire up your new business, and more. Go to pursestrings.co or check the link in the show notes. Now you can be financially fearless.